We are about to begin a new topic that so many people have questions about, and so many people want to know more information about, and that is recycling. And I'm not here today to give you all of the basics, but rather the foundation so that you can understand the recycling process and how recycling works. So today we're all about recycling, and let's get into it right away, and hopefully we'll get a better understanding of the process. Now, to give you a little bit of background, I'm going to spend a little bit of time going over a few things about municipal solid waste, and hopefully this will give you some good background. Just to remind you, we're talking about MSW, meaning municipal solid waste, which is what we like to call trash that we find in our homes, our businesses, our commercial properties, and stuff like that. Of all the municipal solid waste, about 54% is landfilled, all right, or disposed of. Okay, we're looking at about 33%, or about a third, is recycled or reused. Could be both, recycled or reused. And we're looking at about another 13%, which is incinerated. So if you're looking at the total amount of material that we're talking about here today, we're going to stick with the recycled part, all right, the 33%. But let's take that into another level, all right? So if we look at all the sources of municipal solid waste. So now what we're talking about is where do the materials actually originate from. You might not find this surprising, but about 31% of all waste comes from packaging. Okay, and next, which is probably very close, about 26%, believe it or not, comes from food and yard waste. All right. And then the rest comes from both durable and non-durable goods, meaning all kinds of products and stuff like that. That's the sources, where it comes from. And I'm just going to stick with the highest percentages. All right. But let's look at it by, instead of, and by the way, before I continue on, this is by weight. That's going to be very important, not by volume, but rather by weight, since that's how trash is measured. It's mostly measured in weight. We don't have very good statistics on volume, because every time municipal solid waste is moved from one location to another, all units of measurement are by weight. But now we already looked at the sources, so now let's look at the composition. What is this made of? Whoops, composition. What is our trash made of? And we went through this a little bit before. We're looking at about 31% paper and cardboard, or some sort of paper product. All right. The next highest, which is basically tied, are the same two. Okay, food and yard waste at around 13% and 13%. And then next, right there with it, this is by weight, so you would imagine volume would be much greater. You're looking around 12% plastics. Okay, but the key is this. What you're looking at, of the top three, you're looking at purely organic and compostable materials. So these are organic and easily composted. And then, of course, you have the plastics, which are very easily recycled. So if you look at our total waste, most of it, almost entirely, our entire composition of municipal solid waste can be recycled. So if you see that little recycling sign on a product and underneath it says recyclable, you're basically talking about every single product we have out there. Okay? So some background, some important stuff to remember when you look at the sources by weight, and then of course the composition by weight of all the stuff. Okay? Now, let's go and move forward a little bit. Okay? In a little more specifics, this is all about just plastics, because we talk a lot about plastics. You're going to talk about bottled water a lot, and we're talking about plastics in general because they are non-biodegradable. They're not compostable. Okay, so it's the largest percentage of our waste that doesn't fit in that category. But the key here is we talked about which plastics can be recycled, and the two plastics that are recycled on a large scale in the United States are, if you remember, number ones and number twos. Okay, number one is polyethylene terephthalate, or PET, and number two is high density polyethylene. So if you look at our chart here, this is the amount of plastics recycled on a large scale. Okay. The rest are not. So if you look at where the rest originate from, you're talking about packaging again. All right, bags and stuff like that. Okay, and then there's other plastic containers. But if you're looking at what we really truly recycle, it's actually only a small piece of the pie of the total amount of plastics that are out there. So we could talk all we want about plastic recycling, and we will, but we have to understand it's only a small percentage of all the plastics that are out there. All right, so that we have a lot more to deal with that we don't handle in our normal collections. Let's look at all the materials that are recovered. And if you look at this chart, this pie chart, again, we're looking at just the top ones. And in this particular case, this is by weight of the materials recovered, meaning the recycled materials. You will see by weight, again, that's how we measure our waste. Metals are number one. So when we talk about the most recycled material in the United States, it's going to be metals. Aluminum, iron, steels, things like that. Okay. Yard debris and wood waste are behind a little bit, but metals are the number one recycled material in our country. And you're going to see why as we go through our presentation here. So let's look at the 3 R's. And you're so used to hearing about this. Reduce, reuse, recycle. Okay, the 3 R's. And so when we talk about, let's say, reduce, more specifically, we are talking about something called source reduction. That's really what we mean. That means reducing the amount of waste from the source. Now, in industry, that means reducing the waste at the point of manufacturing. All right. From our perspective, it's reducing the amount of waste when we go shopping. So we call it environmental shopping. It's actually doing source reduction. Of the 3 R's, that is the number one thing to do. You want to reduce the need of creating the waste. So source reduction is number one. The second best thing would be to reuse, which is fantastic. Okay, it's you have a product that you don't need anymore, you don't want anymore. You can sell it at a yard sale. One of the best things we can do. Okay, to go out and reuse the material. Now, there's a problem with reuse. Sometimes we can think about reuse like with styrofoam cups, paper cups, and mugs. A lot of times when you reuse the material, there's some energy expenditure, there's some material and some wastewater created for cleaning, like with a mug. So reuse is not always as good as we would think. We would go with source reduction first, but then reuse would be second. I hope that makes sense to you. And then the third is recycle, which is what we're going to spend most of our time on because that's what we do the most. All right. So we look at these as possible solutions. Now, for example, I would, and I do this all the time, under source reduction, if I give you a handout that's several pages long, okay, I could hand out the information on single-sided pieces of paper. But if I was, working on source reduction, I would go to 2-sided paper. That's a way of reducing the waste at the source. And then, of course, reusing. We could always reuse those notes another time. All right, or we can recycle them, which means we throw them into the recycling bin to be used at another time. So what we're going to do is take a look at the recycling process now. All right. We have the first type called open loop recycling. All right, open loop recycling is the concept where you take a product and you make it into a recycled product Okay, but that recycled product is no longer recycled. All right, so we call it open loop recycling. So we're taking a product or a material, okay, making it into a product, use the product, and you put it in a recycle bin, and you make it in a new product, and that new product is no longer recycled. All right, it gets thrown away. So basically, if you want to think about it graphically, you go through use of product, you recycle it back into another product, but then that product then is thrown away. Your loop, it's not a continuous loop where you would make it into a new product, it would get used again, made back and recycled again and again and again. All right, this is called open loop recycling. Now, sometimes we call open loop recycling downcycling. When you downcycle, what that means again is it's basically another term for open loop recycling, but you make it into a product which you are not going to recycle afterwards. All right, and we'll take a look at that as well. And here's a perfect example of some products that are downcycled. All right, especially with plastics in this case. Okay, each of these materials you'll use, and then you're not going to recycle the plastic anymore. So that's open loop recycling. All right. If I go back just a second, there we go. Let's go to closed loop recycling. This is different. In this particular case, you manufacture a product from a raw material, use that product, you collect it, turn it back into the raw material, and make it right back into the same product you originally started with. All right. So it's closed loop. This is what we often consider the better type. So you take a raw material, you make it into a product, use the product, you collect it, reprocess it back into raw material, and make the same exact product over again. An aluminum can goes through this very easily, where you can take the aluminum, make it into an aluminum can, you recycle the aluminum can, it goes right back into making another aluminum can. That's called closed loop recycling. All right. Over time, our recycling rates have risen. We recycle about a third of our waste. So the amount of material that we recycle has been steadily going up, and up. But it has not kept pace, which this graph shows very well, with the amount of waste we generate. So that the gap between what is recycled, which is about a third of all our waste now, and what the total amount of waste we create is widening. Okay, so we have to understand that although we do recycle more, we're creating a whole lot more waste.